The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, sat quietly in what had once been Diana's private sitting room. The room had been preserved almost exactly as it was, with soft cream walls and delicate floral patterns that spoke of a gentler time. Catherine's fingers traced the edge of an old mahogany jewelry box that sat on the antique writing desk, its surface worn smooth by years of careful handling. She had discovered this particular box just 3 days earlier, tucked away in a storage room that palace staff had been reluctant to disturb for nearly 3 decades. The discovery came at a time when Catherine was feeling particularly disconnected from the royal legacy she had inherited. The pressures of modern royal life, the constant scrutiny, and the weight of following in Diana's footsteps had been overwhelming her lately. The jewelry box was smaller than she had expected, no bigger than a large book, but it felt heavy with history as she lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in faded velvet compartments, lay pieces that the world had never seen. These weren't the famous sapphire engagement ring or the Spencer tiara that everyone remembered from photographs. These were Diana's personal treasures, the pieces she had chosen to keep private, away from the public eye. Catherine's breath caught as she lifted out a delicate pearl bracelet. It was simple, almost plain by royal standards, but there was something about its understated elegance that spoke volumes. Attached to it was a small tag, written in Diana's own handwriting, "For quiet moments when I need to remember who I am beneath it all." The discovery of this note sent a wave of emotion through Catherine. She had always known that Diana struggled with the expectations placed upon her, but reading these private words made her feel an immediate connection to her late mother-in-law. It was as if Diana had left these pieces specifically for someone who would understand the burden of being watched, judged, and expected to be perfect at all times. As Catherine continued to explore the box, she found other treasures. A pair of simple gold earrings with a note that read "worn during Harry's first steps." A thin chain necklace with the inscription "From the boys, with love, Mother's Day 1992. Each piece told a story not of royal duty or public appearances, but of a mother's private moments with her children. The most striking piece was a brooch in the shape of a butterfly, made of silver with tiny diamonds forming the wings. It wasn't particularly valuable compared to the crown jewels, but it was exquisite in its craftsmanship. The note with this piece was longer than the others. "This butterfly reminds me that even when we feel trapped, transformation is always possible. Someday, someone else might need this reminder too." Catherine felt tears welling up in her eyes as she read these words. The past year had been particularly challenging for her. The media had been especially critical, comparing her constantly to Diana and finding her lacking in various ways. There had been difficult family dynamics to navigate, protocol to master, and the constant pressure to be a perfect representative of the monarchy while also being a good mother to her own 3 children. William had tried to be supportive, but he carried his own burdens and sometimes seemed overwhelmed by the memories these discussions brought up. The palace staff, while well-meaning, often seemed more concerned with maintaining traditions than understanding the emotional weight of stepping into Diana's role. Catherine had begun to feel isolated, wondering if she would ever truly belong or if she would always be seen as an outsider trying to fill shoes that were too big for her. The discovery of these jewels felt like a gift from beyond, a message from Diana herself that she understood the struggles Catherine was facing. As she held each piece, Catherine could almost feel Diana's presence in the room, a sense of warmth and understanding that she hadn't experienced since joining the royal family. That evening, Catherine showed the jewelry box to William. His reaction was immediate and emotional. He recognized several of the pieces, remembering his mother wearing the pearl bracelet during quiet evenings at home, or the butterfly brooch pinned to her coat during school pickups when she was trying to blend in with other mothers. "She kept these separate for a reason," William said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "These weren't for the world to see. These were hers, really hers." Catherine nodded, understanding completely. The notes, it's like she knew someone would find them someday. Someone who would need to hear what she had to say. They spent hours that night going through each piece, with William sharing memories and Catherine listening to stories she had never heard before. He told her about how Diana would touch the pearl bracelet when she was nervous, how she wore the butterfly brooch to his school sports day because she said it would help her be brave enough to cheer loudly without worrying about what other parents thought. As the weeks passed, Catherine found herself returning to the jewelry box again and again. She would read Diana's notes during particularly difficult days, drawing strength from the wisdom of someone who had walked this path before her. The words became a source of comfort, a reminder that the struggles she faced were not unique and that it was possible to find joy and authenticity even within the constraints of royal life. One afternoon, while Catherine was having tea with her mother, Carol Middleton, she decided to share her discovery. Carol had always been supportive but practical, and Catherine valued her down-to-earth perspective on the complexities of royal life. "It sounds like she left you exactly what you needed to find," Carol said after Catherine had shown her the pieces and read some of the notes aloud. Diana was known for her intuition about people. Maybe she somehow knew that these would end up with someone who would treasure not just the jewelry, but the messages behind them. This conversation sparked an idea in Catherine's mind. What if these pieces weren't meant to stay hidden forever? What if Diana had intended for them to serve a greater purpose, to help others the way they were helping her? The thought grew stronger as Catherine considered the current state of the royal family's relationship with the public. There had been challenges in recent years, difficulties in connecting with younger generations who seemed less interested in traditional monarchy. Perhaps Diana's private collection could serve as a bridge, a way to show the human side of royal life while honoring her memory. Catherine began to envision ways that these pieces could be shared with the world, not just as museum displays, but as part of meaningful initiatives that reflected Diana's values. The butterfly brooch, with its message about transformation, could be part of a program supporting people going through difficult life changes. The pearl bracelet, with its reminder about staying true to oneself, could be featured in campaigns about mental health and authenticity. As winter turned to spring, Catherine's relationship with the jewelry collection deepened. She would often wear one of the pieces during private moments, feeling connected not just to Diana's memory, but to the strength and resilience that the former princess had shown during her most challenging times. The butterfly brooch became her favorite. She wore it during a particularly difficult meeting with senior palace officials about upcoming royal duties, and found that touching it gave her courage to speak up about her concerns and ideas. She wore the pearl bracelet during Charlotte's school play, drawing comfort from Diana's reminder about remembering who she was beneath all the titles and expectations. Each piece began to take on new meaning in Catherine's life, becoming talismans that connected her to both Diana's legacy and her own growing confidence as a member of the royal family. The private notes became a source of daily inspiration, reminding her that it was possible to honor tradition while staying true to her own values and instincts. By the end of spring, Catherine had made a decision. She would find a way to share these treasures with the world, but she would do it in a way that honored both Diana's memory and the private, personal nature of these pieces. The jewelry would not just be displayed, it would be used to continue Diana's work of connecting with people and making a difference in their lives. The plan that was forming in her mind was ambitious and would require careful navigation of royal protocol, but Catherine felt more determined than she had in months. Diana's jewels had given her not just comfort, but purpose, and she was ready to use that purpose to create something meaningful that would extend Diana's legacy into a new generation. As she sat in Diana's old sitting room one evening, watching the sun set through those same tall windows, Catherine felt a sense of peace and determination she hadn't experienced since joining the royal family. The jewelry box sat open beside her, its contents no longer hidden secrets but the foundation for something bigger than either she or Diana could have imagined alone. The summer of 2025 brought with it a flurry of activity as Catherine began to put her ambitious plan into motion. She had spent countless hours researching Diana's charitable work, studying the causes that had been closest to her heart, and trying to understand how the newly discovered jewelry collection could serve a similar purpose in the modern world. Her first step was to consult with historians and jewelry experts who had worked closely with Diana during her lifetime. Catherine arranged private meetings with several individuals who had helped Diana select pieces for important occasions and who understood the personal significance of her jewelry choices. Margaret Hartwell, who had served as Diana's personal jewelry consultant for over a decade, was among the first people Catherine contacted. When Margaret arrived at Kensington Palace on a warm July morning, she was visibly moved to see Diana's private collection again after so many years. "I remember when she acquired each of these pieces," Margaret said softly, examining the butterfly brooch with a magnifying glass. This one was special to her because it was a gift from a young girl she met at a children's hospital. The girl had made it in art therapy after losing her mother, and she wanted Diana to have it because she said Diana looked sad too. This revelation added another layer of meaning to the brooch for Catherine. It wasn't just a beautiful piece of jewelry, it was a symbol of connection between Diana and someone who had seen past her royal title to recognize a kindred spirit dealing with loss and difficulty. As Margaret continued to share stories about each piece, Catherine began to see a pattern. Almost every item in the private collection had a personal story that connected Diana to ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. The pearl bracelet had been worn during her first visit to a hospice, where she had spent hours holding hands with patients who were dying alone. The simple gold earrings had been chosen specifically for visits to homeless shelters because Diana felt that more elaborate jewelry might make people feel uncomfortable or highlight the difference between their circumstances and hers. These stories reinforced Catherine's conviction that the jewelry collection was meant to be more than a museum display. Diana had clearly intended for these pieces to represent connection, empathy, and the breaking down of barriers between the royal family and the people they served. With Margaret's help, Catherine began developing a comprehensive plan for what she was calling Diana's Legacy Initiative. The program would use each piece of jewelry as the centerpiece for different charitable activities, with the jewelry rotating through various engagements throughout the year. The butterfly brooch would anchor a program focused on supporting people going through major life transitions. Catherine envisioned partnerships with organizations that helped individuals recovering from addiction, adjusting to disability, grieving loss, or rebuilding their lives after domestic violence. The symbolism of transformation that the brooch represented would serve as a powerful reminder that change, while difficult, could lead to beautiful outcomes. The pearl bracelet would be featured in mental health initiatives, with its message about remembering one's true self serving as inspiration for programs that helped people maintain their identity and self-worth during challenging times. Catherine planned to wear it during visits to mental health facilities, support groups, and community programs that focused on building resilience and self-esteem. Each piece would have its own dedicated program, but they would all be united by Diana's original vision of using her position and influence to bring comfort and support to those who needed it most. However, implementing such an ambitious program within the constraints of royal protocol proved to be more challenging than Catherine had anticipated. When she presented her initial proposal to the senior palace officials, the response was mixed at best. "While we appreciate your Royal Highness's desire to honor the late princess's memory," said Sir Reginald Pemberton, the private secretary, during a particularly tense meeting, "we must consider the precedent this sets. Royal jewelry has traditionally been used for ceremonial purposes, not as props for charitable initiatives." Catherine felt her frustration rising but tried to remain diplomatic. "These aren't just any pieces of royal jewelry," she explained. "They were Diana's personal collection, and she clearly intended for them to serve a purpose beyond mere decoration. The notes she left make that clear." The debate continued for weeks, with various palace officials raising concerns about security, insurance, and the potential for the jewelry to overshadow the charitable work itself. Some worried that focusing on Diana's jewelry might inadvertently diminish Catherine's own identity and accomplishments, making her appear to be living in her predecessor's shadow. These concerns were not entirely unfounded, and Catherine found herself struggling with questions about her own motivations. Was she truly honoring Diana's legacy, or was she simply seeking validation and connection through someone else's treasures? The self-doubt that had plagued her earlier in the year began to resurface, complicated now by the institutional resistance she was encountering. It was during this period of uncertainty that Catherine received unexpected support from an unlikely source. Prince Harry, despite the ongoing tensions within the family, reached out to her directly after learning about the discovered jewelry collection through William. "I remember those pieces," Harry said during a private phone conversation. "Mum wore them when she wanted to feel like herself, not like a princess. If you're trying to use them the way she would have wanted, you have my full support." This endorsement from Harry meant more to Catherine than she had expected. Despite their complicated relationship, Harry's memories of Diana were invaluable, and his approval gave her the confidence to continue pushing forward with her plans. The breakthrough came when Catherine decided to organize a small, private event to demonstrate how the jewelry initiative might work in practice. She arranged for a gathering at Kensington Palace with representatives from various charitable organizations, along with individuals who had been helped by programs similar to what she was proposing. The centerpiece of the evening was the butterfly brooch, which Catherine wore while sharing the story of its origins and significance. She then introduced Sarah Chen, a young woman who had overcome a severe eating disorder with the help of therapy and community support. Sarah spoke eloquently about the importance of transformation and growth, drawing parallels between her own journey and the symbolism of the butterfly. "When I was at my lowest point," Sarah told the gathered audience, "I felt like I would never be anything more than my illness. But recovery taught me that we all have the capacity for metamorphosis. We can emerge from our darkest times as something beautiful and strong." As Sarah spoke, several people in the audience were moved to tears. The connection between Diana's private treasure and this young woman's powerful story created exactly the kind of meaningful moment that Catherine had envisioned. The jewelry wasn't just a beautiful object to be admired, it was a catalyst for important conversations about hope, resilience, and human connection. The success of this small gathering helped Catherine refine her approach and address some of the concerns that had been raised by palace officials. She developed more detailed protocols for security and insurance, worked with communications experts to ensure that the focus remained on the charitable work rather than the jewelry itself, and created guidelines for how the pieces would be used and displayed. By late summer, Catherine had gained approval for a limited pilot program that would run through the end of 2025. The butterfly brooch would be the first piece to be featured in a public initiative, with a series of engagements planned around the theme of transformation and new beginnings. The announcement of Diana's legacy initiative was made on what would have been Diana's 64th birthday. Catherine chose this date deliberately, wanting to honor not just Diana's memory but also the woman she might have become had she lived to see her sons grown and married. The public response was overwhelmingly positive. People were fascinated by the discovery of Diana's private jewelry collection and moved by the stories behind each piece. The initiative struck a chord with many who had struggled with their own challenges and found inspiration in the idea that even a princess had faced difficulties and found ways to draw strength from meaningful objects and connections. Media coverage was extensive but generally respectful, focusing on the charitable aspects of the program rather than sensationalizing the jewelry itself. Several major newspapers ran feature stories about the organizations that would be partnering with the initiative, bringing valuable attention to causes that often struggled for public recognition. As autumn approached, Catherine felt a sense of accomplishment and anticipation. The first public engagement featuring the butterfly brooch was scheduled for early October at a rehabilitation center for young adults recovering from addiction. She had spent weeks preparing for this event, working closely with the center's staff to ensure that her visit would be meaningful and supportive rather than disruptive. The night before the engagement, Catherine sat once again in Diana's former sitting room, wearing the butterfly brooch and thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. The discovery of the jewelry collection had not only given her a way to honor Diana's memory but had also helped her find her own voice and purpose within the royal family. She thought about Diana's note about transformation and how prophetic those words had been. The jewelry had indeed served as a reminder that change was possible, not just for the people who would benefit from the charitable initiatives, but for Catherine herself. Through this process, she had transformed from someone who felt like an outsider trying to fill Diana's shoes into someone who could honor that legacy while creating something uniquely her own. As she prepared for bed, Catherine carefully returned the brooch to its place in the jewelry box, knowing that tomorrow it would begin its new life as part of a living legacy that would continue to make a difference in people's lives, just as Diana had always intended. The morning of October 15, 2025, dawned crisp and clear as Catherine prepared for her first official engagement as part of Diana's legacy initiative. The Riverside Recovery Centre, located in a converted Victorian mansion in South London, specialised in helping young adults overcome addiction and rebuild their lives. It was exactly the kind of place Diana would have visited, and Catherine felt a mixture of nervousness and determination as her car approached the facility. She wore a simple navy dress with the butterfly brooch prominently displayed on her left lapel. The jewelry piece caught the morning light as she stepped out of the car, its diamonds sparkling like dewdrops on silver wings. Several photographers captured the moment, but Catherine's focus was entirely on the young people waiting to meet her inside the center. Dr. Amanda Roberts, the facility's director, greeted Catherine at the entrance with a warm smile. "We're so honored that you've chosen to begin this initiative with us," she said as they walked through the center's bright, welcoming corridors. Our residents have been looking forward to this visit for weeks. The first stop was the art therapy room, where 8 young people between the ages of 18 and 25 were working on a collaborative mural that depicted various stages of transformation in nature. Butterflies featured prominently in their design, along with trees changing seasons, caterpillars in cocoons, and flowers blooming from dark soil. "We heard about the butterfly brooch and what it represents," explained Jamie, a 22-year-old who had been in recovery for 6 months. "We wanted to create something that shows how transformation doesn't just happen once. It's ongoing, like these butterflies emerging at different stages." Catherine was deeply moved by the artwork and by Jamie's eloquent explanation. She spent nearly an hour with the group, listening to their stories and sharing some of Diana's words about the importance of believing in the possibility of change, even during the darkest moments. One young woman named Lisa, who had been struggling with both addiction and an eating disorder, approached Catherine hesitantly. "Can I see the brooch up close?" she asked quietly. "I know it sounds strange, but I feel like I need to touch something that belonged to someone who understood feeling trapped." Without hesitation, Catherine unpinned the brooch and placed it gently in Lisa's palm. The young woman's eyes filled with tears as she held the delicate piece, tracing the outline of the wings with her finger. "She really wore this when she was scared?" Lisa asked. "According to the note she left with it, yes," Catherine replied softly. "She wrote that it reminded her that transformation was always possible, even when it felt impossible." Lisa nodded, carefully handing the brooch back to Catherine. "I'm going to remember that," she said. "When I have bad days, I'm going to think about the butterfly and remember that change is possible." This interaction, witnessed by several other residents and staff members, created a ripple effect throughout the center. Catherine spent the rest of her visit hearing stories of struggle and recovery, of setbacks and breakthroughs, of young people who had found the courage to transform their lives in ways both small and profound. The visit concluded with a group session where Catherine shared more of Diana's story and the inspiration behind the Legacy Initiative. She read aloud from some of Diana's notes, including the one that had accompanied the butterfly brooch, and talked about how the jewelry collection was meant to be a bridge between Diana's compassion and the needs of people facing challenges today. Princess Diana understood that everyone deserves to be seen and valued, regardless of their circumstances, Catherine told the group. "These pieces of jewelry aren't just beautiful objects, they're reminders of her belief in the dignity and potential of every person." The response from the residents was overwhelming. Many spoke about how the visit had given them hope and renewed motivation in their recovery journeys. The staff reported that in the days following Catherine's visit, they saw increased participation in therapy sessions and group activities, as if the encounter had sparked something meaningful in the community. News coverage of the visit was extensive and largely positive. The image of Catherine allowing Lisa to hold the butterfly brooch became iconic, symbolizing the hands-on, compassionate approach that would define the Legacy Initiative. Social media was filled with supportive comments from people who appreciated seeing the royal family engaging in such a personal and meaningful way with important social issues. However, the success of the first engagement also brought new challenges. The demand for Catherine to visit other organizations skyrocketed, with hundreds of requests pouring into Kensington Palace from charities, support groups, and community organizations around the world. The palace staff, while pleased with the positive response, became concerned about managing expectations and ensuring that the program remained sustainable. Catherine found herself in the unusual position of having created something so popular that it threatened to overwhelm her ability to participate meaningfully in each engagement. She spent long hours with her team, trying to develop criteria for selecting which organizations to visit and how to make the most impact with the limited time available. During this planning period, Catherine received a letter that would profoundly influence the next phase of the Legacy Initiative. It came from Dr. Elizabeth Hartley, a child psychologist who had worked closely with Diana during the 1990s on various projects related to children's mental health. "Your Royal Highness," the letter began, "I have watched with great interest as you've begun to bring Diana's private jewelry collection into public service. I believe I may have information that could help you understand even more deeply what Diana intended for these pieces." Dr. Hartley explained that during her work with Diana, the princess had often spoken about her hope that her personal struggles could somehow be transformed into a source of strength for others. Diana had been particularly interested in the concept of legacy objects, items that could carry forward the wisdom and compassion of one generation to help the next. She once told me, Dr. Hartley wrote, that she hoped her sons would find ways to use everything she had learned, including her pain, to help other people. But she also worried that they might be too close to her story to see the possibilities clearly. She wondered if perhaps someone else, someone with fresh eyes and their own understanding of struggle, might be the right person to carry this vision forward. The letter included an invitation for Catherine to meet with Dr. Hartley to discuss Diana's broader vision for how personal objects could be used therapeutically and symbolically to help people heal and grow. Catherine accepted the invitation immediately, and 2 weeks after the Riverside Recovery Center visit, she found herself in Dr. Hartley's comfortable office in central London, surrounded by books on psychology, trauma recovery, and the therapeutic use of symbolic objects. Diana was ahead of her time in understanding the power of what we now call material culture therapy, Dr. Hartley explained. She intuitively grasped that objects can hold and transmit emotional meaning in ways that words sometimes cannot. Dr. Hartley showed Catherine research studies that had been conducted on the psychological impact of meaningful objects, particularly in therapeutic settings. The data supported what Catherine had observed during her visit to the recovery center, that touching or being near objects with significant personal or symbolic meaning could have measurable positive effects on mood, motivation, and sense of connection. What you're doing with the Legacy Initiative, Dr. Hartley continued, is creating opportunities for people to connect not just with Diana's memory, but with the universal human experiences of struggle, resilience, and transformation that her jewelry represents. This conversation gave Catherine new insights into the potential scope and impact of the program. She began to see that the initiative could grow beyond individual visits to encompass educational components, research partnerships, and even the development of new therapeutic approaches that incorporated the lessons learned from Diana's vision. With Dr. Hartley's guidance, Catherine began planning the next phase of the Legacy Initiative. The pearl bracelet would be featured in a series of engagements focused on mental health and self-identity, with particular emphasis on helping people maintain their sense of self during difficult times. The first pearl bracelet engagement was scheduled for November at a support center for young mothers dealing with postpartum depression. Catherine spent hours preparing for this visit, reading about the challenges these women faced and working with mental health professionals to understand how she could be most helpful. The night before the visit, Catherine again found herself in Diana's former sitting room, this time holding the pearl bracelet and reading the note that had accompanied it, "For quiet moments when I need to remember who I am beneath it all." She thought about her own journey as a mother, the times when she had felt overwhelmed by the expectations and responsibilities of her role, both as a royal and as a parent. The pearl bracelet had become a talisman for her during her own difficult moments, a reminder that beneath all the titles and duties, she was simply a woman trying to do her best for her family and the people she served. As she prepared for bed, Catherine felt a deep sense of gratitude for the path that had led her to this point. The discovery of Diana's jewelry collection had not only given her a way to honor her predecessor's memory but had also provided her with a sense of purpose and direction that she had been seeking since joining the royal family. The butterfly brooch engagement had shown her that the Legacy Initiative could make a real difference in people's lives. Now, with the pearl bracelet and the other pieces still to be featured, she saw endless possibilities for continuing Diana's work of connecting with people in their moments of greatest need. The program was no longer just about beautiful jewelry or even about honoring the past. It had become a living, growing testament to the power of compassion, empathy, and the belief that everyone deserves to be seen, valued, and supported in their journey toward healing and growth. November arrived with the first hints of winter, and Catherine's visit to the Mother's Haven Support Center took place on a gray, drizzly morning that seemed to mirror the emotional weight of the occasion. The center, housed in a converted church in East London, provided counseling and support for new mothers struggling with postpartum depression, anxiety, and the overwhelming challenge of caring for infants while battling their own mental health issues. Catherine wore the pearl bracelet with a cream-colored sweater and dark trousers, choosing clothing that would be comfortable and practical for holding babies and sitting on floors with toddlers. The pearls caught what little light filtered through the stained glass windows, glowing softly against her wrist like drops of moonlight. Sarah Williams, the center's founder and a former sufferer of severe postpartum psychosis, met Catherine at the entrance. "We serve about 40 mothers each week," she explained as they walked through the center's main room, where several women sat in a circle with babies on their laps or playing at their feet. Many of them feel invisible, like they've lost themselves completely in motherhood. This resonated deeply with Catherine, who remembered her own struggles after Charlotte's birth, when the pressure to be the perfect royal mother while dealing with the normal challenges of caring for a newborn had left her feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about her own identity. The first group Catherine joined was a circle of 8 new mothers, their babies ranging in age from 6 weeks to 8 months. The women looked tired, some with the telltale signs of sleepless nights and emotional exhaustion that Catherine recognized from her own early motherhood experiences. "I know what it's like to feel lost," Catherine began, sitting cross-legged on a soft mat with the other mothers. "To wonder if you'll ever feel like yourself again, or if yourself even exists anymore now that you're responsible for this tiny person who needs you completely." One mother, Priya, shifted her 3-month-old son to her other arm and spoke hesitantly. "Some days I look in the mirror and I don't recognize who I see. I know I should be happy, I wanted this baby so much, but I just feel empty and scared all the time." Catherine nodded, understanding completely. Princess Diana, whose bracelet I'm wearing today, wrote a note that said this was for quiet moments when I need to remember who I am beneath it all. She understood that sometimes we need reminders of our core selves, especially when we're carrying responsibilities that feel bigger than we are. As the conversation continued, Catherine shared some of her own experiences with the challenges of motherhood, being careful to acknowledge that her circumstances were different but that the emotional struggles were often universal. She talked about the guilt of leaving her children for royal duties, the pressure to make every moment perfect, and the fear that she wasn't doing enough or being enough for her family. The women in the circle began to open up more, sharing their fears about bonding with their babies, their guilt over not feeling the immediate joy they had expected, and their concerns about being judged by other mothers who seemed to handle everything effortlessly. "Can I see the bracelet?" asked Michelle, a young mother whose baby girl was sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I keep thinking about what you said, about remembering who we are beneath it all." Catherine carefully removed the pearl bracelet and handed it to Michelle, who held it gently while continuing to cradle her daughter. "It's heavier than I expected," Michelle observed. "But not in a bad way. It feels substantial. Like it has weight because it carries something important. Princess Diana wore this during some of her most challenging times as a mother," Catherine explained. "She believed that we all have a core self that remains constant, even when everything else feels chaotic or uncertain." The pearls reminded her that she was valuable and worthy, not because of what she did or how well she performed, but simply because of who she was. The bracelet was passed around the circle, with each mother holding it for a moment and reflecting on Catherine's words. Some women touched the pearls thoughtfully, while others simply held the bracelet in their palms, seeming to draw comfort from its presence. After the group session, Catherine spent time with mothers individually, visiting those who were participating in art therapy, counseling sessions, and a program that taught baby massage techniques to help with bonding. In the art therapy room, she met Rebecca, a mother whose postpartum depression had been so severe that she had been hospitalized and separated from her newborn for 2 weeks. "I made this while I was getting better," Rebecca said, showing Catherine a painting of a woman's face partially obscured by storm clouds, with small breaks in the clouds revealing glimpses of sunlight. "The counselor helped me understand that the depression wasn't all of me. There was still me underneath it, waiting to emerge again." Catherine was struck by how perfectly Rebecca's artwork captured the message Diana had intended with the pearl bracelet. "That's exactly what the princess meant," she said. "Even when we can't see clearly through our struggles, our essential self is still there, waiting for the clouds to part." The visit to Mother's Haven proved to be even more impactful than the butterfly brooch engagement at the recovery center. The intimate nature of the conversations, the vulnerability that the mothers showed in sharing their experiences, and the tangible way the pearl bracelet seemed to provide comfort and connection created moments of profound emotional resonance. Dr. Roberts, who had accompanied Catherine to document the psychological effects of the jewelry's presence, noted several instances where women who had been withdrawn or hesitant became more engaged and communicative after touching the bracelet. "There's something about the physical connection to an object with such meaningful history that seems to unlock emotional expression," she observed. The media coverage of the Mother's Haven visit was extensive and largely focused on Catherine's willingness to share her own maternal struggles. Headlines praised her authenticity and relatability, with many articles noting how her openness about the challenges of motherhood, even within the privileged circumstances of royal life, helped normalize the experiences of ordinary mothers facing similar difficulties. However, the success of these high-profile engagements also brought unexpected complications. Catherine began receiving thousands of letters from people around the world who had heard about Diana's legacy initiative and wanted to share their own stories of struggle and transformation. While these letters were touching and affirming, they also represented a level of personal connection and responsibility that Catherine hadn't anticipated. Many letter writers specifically mentioned wanting to touch or see the jewelry pieces that had provided comfort to others. Some shared photos of their own meaningful objects, a grandmother's ring, a father's watch, a child's drawing, and described how these items helped them through difficult times. Catherine realized that the Legacy Initiative had tapped into something much larger than she had initially envisioned. People were hungry for authentic connection, for reminders that they were not alone in their struggles, and for symbols of hope that transformation was possible even in the darkest circumstances. This realization led to the development of the next phase of the program, the creation of replica pieces that could be distributed more widely while preserving the original jewelry for special occasions. Working with master jewelers and craftspeople, Catherine commissioned simplified versions of Diana's pieces that captured the essential symbolism while being affordable and accessible to a broader audience. The replica butterfly brooches, made of silver-toned metal with crystal accents instead of diamonds, would be given to participants in transformation programs. The replica pearl bracelets, crafted from cultured freshwater pearls, would be offered through mental health support organizations. Each replica came with a card explaining the piece's significance and sharing Diana's original message. This expansion of the program required significant coordination with various charitable organizations and mental health professionals. Catherine worked closely with her team to establish partnerships with groups that aligned with Diana's values and could effectively integrate the symbolic jewelry into their existing programs. By December, Catherine was preparing for what would be the most ambitious engagement yet, a Christmas event that would bring together participants from all the organizations that had been involved in the Legacy Initiative so far. The gathering would take place at Kensington Palace, in the same rooms where Diana had once lived and where Catherine had first discovered the jewelry collection. The event would feature all of Diana's original pieces, worn by Catherine throughout the evening as she moved between different groups and activities. It would be both a celebration of the program's success and an opportunity to demonstrate how Diana's vision of using personal treasures to connect with and support others had evolved into something even more comprehensive than originally imagined. As Catherine planned this culminating event, she reflected on how much had changed since that spring morning when she first opened Diana's jewelry box. The pieces that had initially provided her with personal comfort and connection had become the foundation for a program that was touching lives around the world. The butterfly brooch had indeed proven to be a catalyst for transformation, not just for the people who encountered it, but for Catherine herself. Through the Legacy Initiative, she had found her own voice and purpose within the royal family, creating something that honored the past while addressing present-day needs. The pearl bracelet had reminded countless mothers that their essential selves remained intact despite the challenges of parenthood, while also helping Catherine understand her own journey as a mother and public figure. As she prepared for the Christmas celebration, Catherine felt a deep sense of gratitude for the path that had led her to this point. Diana's jewelry had become more than beautiful objects or even meaningful symbols, they had become tools for healing, connection, and hope in ways that their original owner could never have fully imagined but would undoubtedly have embraced. The evening of December 20th, 2025, transformed Kensington Palace into something magical. The staterooms, normally used for formal ceremonies and diplomatic receptions, had been arranged to accommodate nearly 200 guests representing every organization that had participated in Diana's Legacy Initiative throughout the year. Soft lighting illuminated the elegant spaces, while Christmas decorations added warmth to the grandeur of the historic palace. Catherine had spent weeks planning every detail of this culminating celebration, wanting to create an atmosphere that would honor both Diana's memory and the incredible stories of transformation and resilience that had emerged through the program. She wore a flowing emerald green dress that complemented all of Diana's jewelry pieces, which she would change throughout the evening as she moved between different groups. The event began in the main reception room, where Catherine welcomed everyone while wearing the complete collection visible for the first time since its discovery. The butterfly brooch was pinned to her left shoulder, the pearl bracelet adorned her wrist, the simple gold earrings caught the candlelight, and a delicate chain necklace completed the ensemble. She had never worn all the pieces together before, and the effect was both understated and deeply moving. 8 months ago, Catherine began her opening remarks. I discovered a small jewelry box that had been tucked away for nearly 3 decades. Inside were pieces that belonged to Princess Diana, along with handwritten notes that revealed her deepest hopes about how personal treasures could be transformed into sources of strength and connection for others. The audience, which included Lisa from the Recovery Center, Michelle from the Mothers Support Group, Sarah who had spoken at the first demonstration event, and dozens of other individuals whose lives had been touched by the Legacy Initiative, listened with rapt attention as Catherine recounted the journey that had brought them all together. Princess Diana wrote that transformation was always possible, even when it felt impossible, Catherine continued. Tonight, I see living proof of that truth in each of your faces. You have not just survived your challenges, you have used them as stepping stones to help others and to become stronger versions of yourselves. The evening was structured as a series of conversations and activities in different rooms, allowing guests to share their experiences and connect with others who had participated in various aspects of the program. In the blue drawing room, mothers from the support groups gathered around tables displaying children's artwork that had been inspired by the pearl bracelet's message about maintaining one's identity through difficult times. Priya, the mother who had first spoken about feeling lost after her son's birth, had brought her baby, now 6 months old and thriving. I still wear the replica bracelet every day, she told Catherine. On the hard days, I touch the pearls and remember what you said about Princess Diana understanding what it meant to feel lost. It reminds me that feeling lost doesn't mean I am lost. In the green drawing room, participants from addiction recovery and transformation programs had created a collaborative display featuring butterfly imagery from around the world, each piece representing a different aspect of personal metamorphosis. Jamie, who had been working on the mural at the Riverside Recovery Center, had been clean for nearly a year and was now volunteering as a peer counselor for newer residents. The butterfly brooch gave me something to focus on during the hardest days, Jamie explained to a group of newer recovery participants. When I wanted to give up, I would think about Princess Diana carrying that message of hope, and it helped me remember that change really is possible if you keep believing in it. As the evening progressed, Catherine moved between the groups, changing jewelry to highlight the specific pieces that had been most meaningful to each program. When she joined the mental health advocates in the red drawing room, she wore only the pearl bracelet, allowing its simple elegance to underscore conversations about finding strength in authenticity and self-acceptance. Dr. Elizabeth Hartley, the psychologist who had worked with Diana and helped Catherine understand the therapeutic potential of meaningful objects, was conducting informal interviews with participants about their experiences. Her preliminary findings suggested that the physical connection to objects with significant symbolic meaning could indeed have measurable positive effects on mood, motivation, and sense of hope. What we're seeing here, Dr. Hartley explained to Catherine during a quiet moment, is evidence of something Diana intuitively understood decades ago. Objects can carry emotional energy and meaning that transcends their material value. By making these pieces accessible to people in their moments of need, you've created a bridge between past wisdom and present healing. One of the most moving moments of the evening occurred when representatives from organizations around the world who had received replica pieces shared videos and photos of how the jewelry was being used in their programs. A children's hospital in Australia showed young patients wearing replica butterfly pins during chemotherapy sessions. A women's shelter in Canada had incorporated the pearl bracelet replicas into their self-esteem workshops. A grief counseling center in Scotland used the butterfly symbol as part of their healing gardens, where people could reflect on transformation and renewal. Catherine realized that Diana's Legacy Initiative had grown far beyond anything she had originally envisioned. What had begun as a personal discovery and a desire to honor Diana's memory had evolved into a global network of organizations using symbolic objects to provide comfort, hope, and connection to people facing various challenges. As the formal part of the evening concluded, Catherine found herself in Diana's former sitting room with a small group that included William, Harry, who had traveled specifically for this event, Dr. Hartley, and several of the individuals whose stories had been most pivotal in shaping the program. Mom would have been amazed to see how this turned out, Harry said quietly, examining the now empty jewelry box that had started it all. She always hoped her experiences could help other people, but I don't think she could have imagined the scope of what you've created." William nodded, his emotion clearly visible. "She used to say that she wanted her life to count for something beyond the headlines and the protocol. This initiative has given her story a kind of immortality that's actually meaningful." Lisa, the young woman who had first asked to touch the butterfly brooch at the recovery center, spoke up from where she sat near the window overlooking the palace gardens. "I've been clean for 4 months now," she announced, her voice steady and proud. "Every time I wanted to use, I thought about that butterfly and about Princess Diana believing that transformation was possible. It sounds simple, but it worked when nothing else did." Catherine felt tears welling up in her eyes as she looked around the room at the faces of people whose lives had been touched by Diana's legacy in ways both profound and practical. The jewelry pieces, now returned to their box for the evening, had fulfilled their purpose in ways that exceeded even Diana's original hopes. As the guests began to depart, many stopped to thank Catherine personally and to share their commitments to continuing the work in their own communities. The replica pieces would ensure that the initiative's impact continued to spread, while the original jewelry would be preserved for future special engagements that could reinforce and expand the program's reach. In the weeks following the Christmas celebration, Catherine received hundreds of letters and messages from people who had attended the event or heard about it through media coverage. Many shared their own stories of transformation and resilience, while others expressed interest in bringing similar programs to their communities. The Legacy Initiative had established partnerships with over 50 organizations in 15 countries, with requests for expansion coming from every continent. The replica jewelry program was being managed by a dedicated team that worked with certified craftspeople to ensure quality while keeping costs accessible for charitable organizations. As 2025 drew to a close, Catherine reflected on the extraordinary year that had begun with a simple discovery in a forgotten storage room. Diana's private jewelry collection had not only provided her with personal comfort and connection during a difficult period, but had become the foundation for a program that was touching lives around the world in exactly the way Diana would have wanted. The butterfly brooch, with its message about transformation, had indeed proven prophetic. Catherine herself had been transformed through this journey, finding her voice and purpose within the royal family while honoring the legacy of the woman who had walked this path before her. The pearl bracelet, with its reminder about remembering one's true self beneath all external pressures, had become a symbol of hope for mothers, mental health advocates, and anyone struggling to maintain their identity during challenging times. Most importantly, Diana's vision of using personal treasures to create connections and provide comfort had evolved into something sustainable and far-reaching. The Legacy Initiative would continue beyond any single individual, creating a permanent bridge between Diana's compassion and the ongoing needs of people facing difficulties. On New Year's Eve, as Catherine sat once again in Diana's former sitting room with the jewelry box open beside her, she felt a profound sense of completion and continuity. The pieces that had once been private treasures had become public sources of hope, exactly as their original owner had secretly hoped they might. Diana's most treasured jewels had indeed been revived, not just as beautiful objects to be admired, but as living symbols of the enduring power of compassion, resilience, and the belief that transformation is always possible, even in the darkest of times. Through Catherine's vision and dedication, they would continue to inspire and comfort people for generations to come, ensuring that Diana's legacy of love and service would never be forgotten.